Hello, my name is Fiona Imbali from ACT, and today we are privileged to have policymakers and researchers from East Africa, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Ethiopia to discuss about climate financing and mechanisms to enable them to access global financing on climate change. The GCF fund was established as a financial mechanism of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change to help countries to access the global financing, which has not been very effective in the past. And we are using a CRIBS mechanism. CRIBS stands for Climate Relevant Innovation System Builders, which is an innovation that was developed by the researchers from the University of Sussex in the UK in collaboration with the African Sustainability Hub, which is located within the Africa Center for Technology Studies in Nairobi. And with me to continue with the discussions today, we have Mildred Namira, who is from Uganda. She is an economist with the Ministry of Water and Environment. Welcome, Mildred.
Thank you.
And to my immediate right, we have Dr. Calvin Hisa, who works with the Kenya Industrial Research and Development Institute. He is the head of the Environment Department and also a senior researcher with KIRDI. Welcome, Dr. Calvin.
Thank you.
On my left is Dr. George Moniki, who is Director of Research and Planning at National Environment Trust Fund, NETFund. Welcome, Dr. George.
Thank you.
And to his left, we have Ms. Beliu Limeni from Ethiopia. She is an associate researcher with the Ethiopian Environment and Forestry Research Institute in Addis Ababa. Welcome, Ms. Beliu.
Thank you.
And to my far left is Dr. Emmanuel Choir, who is a researcher and a consultant with the University of Dar es Salaam. Welcome, Dr.
Thank you very much.
I'll start with Dr. George. Could you please briefly tell us what NETFund is all about? What do you do at NETFund?
So NETFund is a government body established under the Environmental Management and Coordination Act. As you know, the EMCA Act of 1999 tried to bring together or build institutions within government that are going to spearhead environmental issues in Kenya. So under the Act, one of the institutions that was formulated was NEMA, who does the regulation and enforcement. And then NETFund was built as a financier for the environment sector, but our specific mandate is actually capacity building, research and publication, and also grants and scholarships.
Having worked in the government, you understand the processes of formulating policies that will definitely enable countries to enhance their capabilities to access such funds as the GCF. What, in your opinion, do you think would be done better or could be improved to enhance the policies to ensure that more stakeholders are engaged and are able to get the GCF funding?
A very interesting question. We in government, we are very good at coming up with strategies on how to exploit some of these international opportunities or resources. But once we have these strategies, implementing these strategies most of the times becomes a problem. And I think it's part of institutional arrangements. Where does these strategies lie? Who is supposed to implement them? And in most instances, we do actually lose out some of these international opportunities. Currently, we have a national strategy on GCF, how we are going to approach GCF as a country. And GCF is a very, very unique opportunity for us because it can fund most of the things we've been discussing for many years in this country. So I think from the government side and from NETFund, I think for us we are very ready, much ready, to support any processes or activities that will try to enhance the country's capacity to access these resources.
Thank you very much. You have been at the Elementaita Country Lodge for 2 weeks to discuss some of these processes on GCF and the CRIBS mechanism. How has the CRIBS mechanism enabled you to tweak your thought processes on some of the issues that you are going to engage on when you go back to NETFund?
First of all, I would say thank you to ACT and Sussex University for bringing us here and taking us away from the cold of Nairobi for 2 weeks. This was really refreshing. But apart from that, we have learned a lot of things during these 2 weeks of training. One of them is how do you, if you are designing a project, how do you make sure that all the components of that project feed into the bigger system? Basically, how do you, when you're addressing issues, this has been a big problem in the country. that we work in silos. If you're working in education, if you're working on food security, you don't understand the link between food security and businesses, environment, and all that. So I think this training kind of, for me, brought those silos down or the walls down, and there is need to talk to more stakeholders and understand how specific components interact with other components. Basically, the system approach to looking at things for me was very, very refreshing. And I think most of the projects in Kenya, the sustainability issues and the effectiveness has always been an issue. And I think part of it was looking at it in those siloed kind of thinking. But now with these new ways of thinking in terms of a system and looking at the system entirely, I think is revolutionary and is quite innovative. And personally, I'm going to adapt it in designing my projects moving forward.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moniki. Mildred, you are an economist with the Ministry of Water and Environment in Uganda, and sometimes they refer to you as the GCF lady.
Yeah, sure.
Could you tell us a bit more about what you do with the ministry in Uganda?
Well, like Fiona said, I'm an economist in the Ministry of Water and Environment. I'm in charge of writing proposals. Right now, I've been part of the team that is applying for accreditation, that is putting things together so that we get accredited as Ministry of Water to be able to access funds for the GCF. We've gone through a lot of processes. We've looked for information west, left, right, and because of that, I've been referred to as a GCF lady, because I keep entering people's offices, disturbing people in the middle of their working schedules to provide the necessary information.
Well, thank you very much. During the 2 weeks you have discussed with the various policymakers and researchers in East Africa, and you have come to understand the GCF processes better, and you have an idea that you'd like to take back home. You talk about the landscape infrastructure when it comes to dams and valley dams in Uganda. Could you tell us a bit about the project that you intend to take back home and how the CRIBS processes and mechanism has enabled you to think in a better way than when you first came in for the workshop?
When I first came in for the workshop, I came with a scratchy concept note. It wasn't a concept note as such. It was just an idea, a proposal. But I didn't know that I would come up with something that is as unique as it is at this level. I've developed from one idea to another. I came with an idea of writing our business as usual way of writing proposals. I came with an idea of just getting maybe equipment and desilting dams and all that. But then when I came to understand the GCF concept and the CRIBS concept, the way we work in systems, I kept on building on my ideas, expanding, thinking better, thinking innovatively, and as I talk, I've come up with a totally different project. Yes, it is in line with desilting of our dilapidated dams, but now it encompasses so many things, a whole wide system, a landscape approach of doing things. And I think that if this proposal goes through, we shall minimize costs of desilting dams. We shall have an ecosystem that is friendly. And I am thinking that in case this project also goes through, we shall be able to, like when we talk of the landscape approach, we shall be able to involve communities to do things differently that will help the waters that is stored in these tanks to be of good quality. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And on my far left is Dr. Emmanuel Choir from Tanzania. Dr. you have been a researcher for a long time.
Oh, thank you very much. First of all, I think I have to be very grateful for the training that we have been receiving at Elementaita here concerning CRIBS idea. My project is on addressing the limited use of renewable energies, like from agricultural waste. Currently in Tanzania, not only Tanzania but also developing countries, many households they use firewood for cooking and charcoal. Like currently more than 90% households in Tanzania they use charcoal and firewood. Like 71% of households they use firewood and 37% they use charcoal. Basically, these sources of energy for cooking, they are destructive environmentally and also healthy wise. Now, my project is there is a limited use of improved clean bio energies for cooking. So I would want really to see improved use of clean, green, and improved sources of energy from agricultural wastes. My research focus is mostly on renewable sources of energy for cooking, because as you know, cooking is a central part of any household, and the energy for cooking is critical, basically environmental wisely and healthy wisely. Now, as we know now, and as the literature shows, many people or households in developing countries, they use firewood and charcoal for cooking. And these sources of energy, they are really environmentally and healthy destructive. So I want to see increased and improved use of improved clean energy from agricultural wastes. And currently in Tanzania, not only Tanzania, in many developing countries, they have a lot of agricultural wastes which can be turned into energy sources for cooking. So my project and my research is on enhancing increased use of bioenergy for cooking in Tanzania.
Okay, one of the 6 elements of the GCF proposals is that it should be able to create opportunities for employment opportunities for people. Have you considered that? How is your project planning on ensuring that more young people or more people have opportunities for employment?
Basically, employment and the creation of new sources of income is really central in my project, because if I take example of using cotton stalks for making briquettes, first of all, it is going to it is going to be as an additional source of income for farmers who farm cotton. Not only there are many people who will be involved in the whole value chain of briquettes making, because those who will be selling raw materials, cotton stalks, those who will be building factories for making briquettes, and those who will be retailing and wholesaling charcoal briquettes, they are going to earn from that process. So I can see opportunities of creating employment and adding sources of incomes for those who will be involved in the process.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Kelvin from Kirdi, you are a senior researcher and also the head of environment at Kirdi. Could you please tell us a bit more of what you do at Kirdi?
Thank you very much. I work for a government institution called Kenya Industrial Research and Development Institute, Kirdi. Kirdi is a state corporation under the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Cooperatives. Our job is basically to do research that seeks to improve the productivity and competitiveness of the Kenyan industry. At the moment, within the Environment Division, our research focus is in the green economy, circular economy space. We are trying to advise that it's not wise for us to rely on the wasteful linear economy. We need to go circular so that reduces pressure on the use of our finite resources and also conserve the environment in terms of final disposal of the wastes. So basically, that's what we are trying to do it in industry, and so that industrialists can now innovatively think of ways of adding value to waste as opposed to letting it go to the landfill.
Thank you very much. Before the training, you had previously been involved in GCF processes and the proposals, writing. What are some of the challenges that you have faced as an institution or as an individual, and what do you think are some of the challenges that stakeholders in Kenya and in the East African sphere are actually facing in terms of putting forth fundable proposals for the GCF?
Great. Coming from a policy background, I believe in participatory approaches, and I'm very excited with this training because it has helped me to understand how you can put stakeholders together and work with them to have a shared vision so that some of them can contribute to alleviating the cost of developing a project. We have partnered with UNEP to develop a GCF proposal. Our concept note has been approved, and we are now working on the full proposal. One of the challenges that we came across was that it's a very expensive process to be able to put stakeholders together and solicit their input and buy-in with respect to developing this proposal. So it was very nice for us to bring on board UNEP. UNEP has helped us to finance the development of our concept note. They are also helping us to fund the full development of a full project proposal. Now, the GRIPS project training that I've gone through puts in place a structured way of doing that. How do you map out your stakeholders? How do you engage them? And therefore, this training to me is a game changer in the sense that it now gives me a structured way of dealing with preparatory steps before I call people for workshops or stakeholder meetings.
Thank you very much. Your project is an interesting one, water. When you talk about when it floods in Nairobi, the city is in a mess. It is unlivable. We have a lot of people talking about, does government have policymakers, does it have advisors to advise them on best ways to tap this rainwater and put it into commendable use? And your project is trying to look at a circular way of doing things rather than the linear way of doing things. Could you please tell us, elaborate more on what you are revolutionary about water in Nairobi?
Great. As you all know, Kenya is a water scarce country. Our per capita water allocation has been dwindling over the years, and we are going towards absolute scarcity. Unfortunately, the way we use our water is very wasteful. Our activities are governed around the linear way of getting the water, using it, and letting it go to the effluent treatment plant. We are saying that it's possible to apply the thinking of circular thinking, so that part of the wastewater can be treated further, so that it can be used to help in providing water for houses and road construction. So if that happens, then we are going to alleviate the pressure on potable water and therefore move towards water security. So basically, when it rains, we don't want all the water to quickly run to the Indian Ocean. We want to put in place measures that can tap part of that water and use it to replenish our underground aquifers that are now being exploited very significantly. We also want to ensure that part of the water can be harvested from roads so that we replenish our aquifers and holistically be able to create a water secure mechanism.
Thank you very much. Using the CRIBS approach, a systemic way of trying to ensure that these processes are effective, could you elaborate a bit on some of the stakeholders and some of the networks you will build upon to ensure that this process and this idea will just not lie somewhere and not be implemented?
Great, thank you. That's an interesting question. I think to me the GRIPS idea is a game changer. And I was very impressed with the systems and subsystems approach. I believe that if I look at the water sector, now I can be able to map out all the stakeholders nicely, zero on those who make a lot of sense with respect to the objectives that I want to realize, and be able to rally them around a given vision, so that together we start talking about circularity, thinking in cycles, and therefore I find it extremely useful.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kelvin. Now to the lady who has not been given an opportunity to speak, Belin. You come from Ethiopia. As an associate researcher who is definitely passionate about forest issues, tell us a bit more about what your project intends to do when you go back to Ethiopia, and how the CRIBS training at Elementaita has enabled you to tweak your thinking process into enabling you think in a different way, and how you will use the skills you have attained here to make it effective.
Thank you. I came from a government organization, Ethiopia Environment and Forest Research Institute. Well, come to the point, my project is focused on alleviating deforestation. So one of the intervention is going to be the afforestation in terms of rehabilitating degraded lands and increase silviculture management of woodlands, and increase productivity of the current farmlands, because farmers nowadays degrade, deforestate because of looking for another farmland. So it's the main problem what we have observed. So this 2-week training helped me. Before that, I came with a very general concept note. It was very difficult for me to see the scope and the intervention, and then under intervention, I don't know who will be participated and so on. So within this 2-week training, I can able to identify the exact intervention and the stakeholders I'm going to work with, and I became very specific on a specific problem. That's how I get it.
Thank you very much. One of the requirements for the RED Plus projects by the GCF is that your proposal should definitely align with the national and international policies. How has your project aligned with these policies to ensure that you can tap into the GCF fund?
Okay. As you said, there are global, regional, and national commitments. So, based on that, the government of Ethiopia has set a strategy to mitigate this climate change. One of the strategies climate, we call it CREG, climate reliance green economy. We are now using that strategy to alleviate those things. So it's definitely aligned with those goals. There are many things in under that strategy. One of the pillars to achieve this problem is forestry. That means afforestation and rehabilitating those degraded lands. One of the mechanisms that the government set as a pillar. So if I align with that, definitely it's a good opportunity for us to have this kind of funding, and also on RED Plus thing. This is completely aligned with those policies.
Thank you very much. What ideas do you have in terms of ensuring that all the stakeholders are definitely engaged? Because the CRIBS process mechanism tries to look at the various stakeholders and the networks that you will build into to ensure that you do not work alone or individually. What networks will you tap into, and how will you go about it to ensure that these processes are making headway, and for your country you can be able to get funding for the GCF?
Well, there are many stakeholders who are now going to do. In the first place, regarding rehabilitation, there is Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. It will be my first stake to undertake those activities, and there is also Ethiopian Agricultural Research Institute. So my third objective is just to increase productivity of the land. So there are improved agricultural technologies and some organic fertilizers. These all things will be gained from those research centers. And there are also land administration, because in Ethiopia land is belong to the state, so we have to have that recommendation from those bodies. These are some of my potential stakeholders. So through those stakeholder identification, what we have acquired from this training, I will try to conduct those assessments, and I try to get those stakeholders in a meeting, and then we'll set the way forward actions together. So this is what I'm expecting.
Thank you very much. Dr. Boniki, you talk about food security passionately. You say there's a lot that can be done that hasn't been done before. And your idea is revolutionary. Tell us a bit about what you think about the food security in this country, and what your idea is going to bring forth in terms of trying to send something commendable to the GCF.
Very good question. In fact, I might start with a few statistics. By the turn of this century, Kenya, we are supposed to be 256 million people in this country. Right now, we are 45 million. At 45 million, we can't feed ourselves. How are we going to feed ourselves at 256? And that is a serious question that we should ask ourselves. Because of climate change, we are experiencing droughts almost every 5 years. In the last 20 years, we have experienced two droughts that have lasted more than 2 years, actually 3 years. That is the 1999 to 2001 and the 2008 to 2010. Those were massive droughts, and the amount of losses that we experienced both as a government and as individuals were massive. Within the same 5 years, I think the national government has declared around 4 droughts as national disasters. You go back to 1990 up to today, the government has declared 7 national disasters. Out of those 7, 5 of them were droughts. So this is a problem which is already with us. And when you talk about food security, I don't know whether you have ever slept with your empty tummy. It's painful, it hurts, and I don't think it's an issue of when you're hungry, you can't actually think about anything else. And we need to think critically about food security. There is a study that was done in 2007 that kind of tried to model what are the future scenarios with climate change in Kenya. And from the study, the semi-arid lands are going to lose their productivity by up to 25% by 2030. So look at those problems and how they're coming together. Huge population, dropping productivity. That is basically a recipe for disaster. But that is not the end. We are thinking creatively on how to address this situation. And my idea is on cassava. I know a lot of people have done a lot on cassava, but I'm thinking of how can we develop a national program on promoting cassava, not just as a subsistent crop, but as a crop that reaches the same level as maize in terms of being a staple crop. And this approach, according to some of the new tricks I have learned from Cribs, it requires a kind of a systems approach. You have to look at it from the productivity. And not only the productivity has so many other components. How do farmers get disease-free planting materials? How do farmers get inputs? How do you introduce appropriate technology for mechanizing the farming system? Now, moving from the productivity, you have to look at processing. Do we have to cassava is very interesting. Once you harvest it, within 24 hours, it loses almost 20% of its value. But if you can introduce simple, appropriate technologies like Nigeria has done at the farm level, so immediately the farmer harvests, they can process the cassava, basically just cut it into chips and dry it. Simple technology. And then once the chips are dried, then you can put it forward to the industries. And for the market component of this, we are thinking of supporting it with a lot of building and enabling environment, mainly from the policy perspective. There is already some things happening within the Ministry of Agriculture of ensuring that most of our flours are blended. So how do we make sure that that blending component receives enough cassava that we will not have issues of saying we don't have cassava, we have to import cassava, as we've been saying about maize. So my whole idea is about the cassava value chain, looking at it as a system. And when we are designing these projects, again, from the ideas from CRIBS, there is so many things we are not seeing at the moment. And when we are designing this, we are also creating a fund, a cassava fund somewhere, so that in case there is people who have great ideas, great innovations, then that fund can be used to support those innovations from the production all the way to the marketing of cassava. So we are looking at this entirely as a system. I am very sure it's going to work, and I'm excited about it.
Thank you very much. But Kenya is largely a maize country. A lot of Kenya, ugali, is a staple food of Kenya. So how do you intend to introduce the cassava into the psyche of a lot of Kenyans who are used to ugali from maize?
One of the components, a bigger portion of the component of the proposal we are putting forward is actually research. Research to answer that question. How do we make sure that Kenyans can accept the introduction of blended flours, and at what levels we are going to blend this? And I think in the proposal, when you look at the main actors, the African Center for Technology Studies will play a critical role in actually answering those very, very specific questions. But if you look at the kind of problems we are facing today and you project them into the future, I think any Kenyan would be happy to enjoy ugali made of blended flour.
Thank you very much, Daktari. Well, I still have a question for Dr. Kelvin about your circular method of doing things in Nairobi and tapping into the water when it floods, and more ideas on how we can engage the county government perhaps and other stakeholders to ensure that we definitely tap into the rainwater when it does rain in Nairobi. And my question is, we have seen other areas in Murang'a where they have tried to also incorporate this to tap into the water and make use of it. How are you planning on engaging the various stakeholders in Nairobi to ensure that your project proposal makes sense to them before you even go to the GCF?
Great. Thank you very much. My thoughts are revolving around the idea that we can use flood water to improve our water security. We can also use water that is treated within our effluent treatment plants, refine it further, and reuse it for low quality requirements like building roads, building houses, and so on. So doing that will alleviate the pressure on the use of potable water. In order for us to do this, we are now operating under a Water Act 2016. And this Water Act creates very wonderful institutions. One such institution is the National Water Harvesting and Storage Authority, which we are going to partner with so that we know how we can be able to tap part of the flooding water and use it to recharge our underground aquifers, and also use part of that water upon treatment to improve our water security. Now, flood harvesting is something that is very emotional in this country. We have the Northern Collector Tunnel in Murang'a, which was very emotive because information was not shared by all the stakeholders, especially those ones downstream. And what was there was that people thought that the tunnel is going to divert a whole river, and therefore they will not have water downstream. So this GRIPS engagement idea of pulling stakeholders together, sharing with them with respect to the shared vision, the networks, and parts of involving them in the decision-making process will ensure that what we do here is something that is fully understood, and therefore people don't make noise that is not based on any evidence. So basically that's how we want to do it. We also have our Ministry of Water, which should be able to help us develop an enabling policy environment to facilitate this, so that water that is treated in Dandora sewerage treatment works can be pre-treated further, and we're using that for road construction, for construction of buildings. Then we harvest part of the water, because the irony is that in Nairobi when it rains we have so much water floating around, but 2-3 weeks down the line there's no water. So if we captured part of that, that will boost our water security.
Thank you very much. And well, this has been done in other developed countries. We have London, we have Denmark, where they recycle their water and they use it and recycle it over and over again. Do you have plans in the future, perhaps, if your proposal is accepted at the GCF, to now incorporate it further and ensure that it's not just used for industrial use and construction, it can be reused even further to ensure that water security is actually something that we can be proud of as Nairobians to speak about?
Great, yeah. Closer home we have the city of Windhoek, where they treat their water and is drunk again and again and again. Countries like Singapore, India have basically done this, London and so on. So basically this is a proven technology. We want to start with road construction, house construction for a start, but ultimately we want to close the whole cycle so that wastewater is treated and used for potable uses. And I think it has been proven in Namibia, Singapore, London, and of course India.
Why Nairobi? Why not Mombasa or Kisumu or any other cities for your project?
You know, Nairobi is the center of everything. 60% of our GDP sits in Nairobi. So when we get it right in Nairobi, then other cities will borrow leaf from it.
You're confident that the GCF will look at your proposal and say this is something innovative that, maybe has not been brought forth before?
Yeah, this space of circular economy is very disruptive. It is disrupting the linear economy. And we are confident that we are able to convince GCF that going circular creates opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mildred. Takeout from the GCF processes from the GCF and the CRIBS processes during the 2 weeks training at Elementaita?
Well, I have learnt a lot. I thought I wouldn't get such knowledge from anywhere. I've learnt the system-wide way of thinking, the new ways of doing things, the new ways of thinking and applying them in writing concepts and proposals. And I'm really excited that I'm going to share this knowledge that I've gotten from here with my colleagues back home, and we are going to write proposals that are convincing enough to prospective funders, and we are sure that these concepts shall be funded in future.
Thank you very much. And how do you plan to institutionalize the CRIBS processes when you go back home? How are you planning on engaging more stakeholders in the climate change networks to understand the CRIBS processes and how they can definitely use them to leverage on the GCF funding and other funding on climate change?
Thank you. When I go back, of course, I have those supervisors above me who sent me here. The first thing that I will do is to buy in, write and back to office brief them about this training, and ensure that I incorporate those key elements that make this training unique from any other training that I've attended, and also ensure that during forums and other meetings, I introduce this idea. I keep talking about it. I shouldn't stop talking about what CRIBS is about and the benefits that we can get out of it.
Thank you very much. Dr. Kelvin, in Kenya, of course, there are very many stakeholders in the climate change sphere. How do you plan to, first of all, institutionalize CRIBS at Kirdi? And what processes will you put in place to ensure that more people learn about CRIBS and they can engage effectively for the funding of GCF and other funds on climate change?
Great. Climate change is cross-cutting. And by the mere fact that it's cross-cutting, it brings people who are operating in silos, as Dr. Mwanengi said, to start working together. So for Kirdi, we have an environment division, which is going to serve as a champion of the GRIPS idea. But now, because it's cross-cutting, we engage other divisions. We have like 8 more divisions. So we are going to serve as the champions, then we pull in other divisions. Now this relies on effective communication and awareness raising among them so that they buy into, as Mildred mentioned, into this vision. And all this revolves about the GRIPS goals, creating a shared vision. So we are going to kind of create a mini GRIP within Kirdi to just champion these ideas and loop in as many players as possible. Our hope is that this creates a chain reaction where everybody is now talking about GRIPS, and therefore it becomes a movement that we anchor on to improve our financial status. As a state corporation, our research funds have been dropping all over the years. Therefore, we are forced to go out there and create additional research funds. So this is a great opportunity for us to go and rally all researchers around ourselves to be able to tap into it and boost our research endowment.
Thank you very much. Dr. Mwaniki, one of the reasons why CRIBS came into place was to try and ensure that more African countries and their policymakers and researchers are able to tap into the global fund, which previously the developed countries like China will definitely get a lot more funding than African countries like Kenya. In your opinion, the 2 weeks at Elementaita, CRIBS networks and mechanisms with the East African researchers and policymakers, has it been effective? What has been your most outstanding takeout from the processes? And do you think after the workshop, more policymakers in Africa, and starting with the East African team, is going to tap into the GCF fund?
That was a good question, and particularly because you used the word effective and not sustainable. I think I did learn a lot. One of the things I think the training did is demystify the idea of developing projects. Most of the African policymakers, and for us who are in practice, the idea of developing projects for funding has always been something very elusive, and we actually didn't know how to approach it. And we used to sit and discuss, and these are the issues. But now the CRIBS ideas on how to systematically identify what are the knots within a system, what are the bottlenecks, and what are some of the strategies to unlock things. I think that is, as Dr. Kisa says, is a game changer. And what keeps me awake at night, I remember one day world leaders were asked what keeps them at night, and then from there you could predict who would succeed and who would fail. What keeps me awake at night is how do we get more resources for the environmental sector? And part of those questions that I ask myself when I'm awake at night, I think were answered with this training. So moving forward, I'm seeing a lot of changes within how we approach these global financing mechanism. And I can assure you, as Kenya, we are going to be among the leading African countries in terms of accessing these finances, because we have a lot of needs that these finances can sort out.
Okay, do you think we are going to, as East African countries, going to tap into the GCF fund and at least get some proposals funded by the GCF?
At least the commitment I had, both from ACTS and from Sussex University, and also from the alumni who will be the alumni, is that we are going to continue talking to each other, supporting each other, and kind of developing these ideas. I think I've also heard from ACTS there are more trainings on how to really come up with this GCF concept. In fact, for this training, before this training, I thought GCF concepts were very complicated things to develop. And I think, in fact, I just called my CEO and I said, I can just sit in the office for a week and develop one. So I think we are going to get some resources from GCF. And GCF should be ready for the kind of innovative, transformative ideas that will be coming from the East Africa region.
Thank you very much. And for anyone who's watching and they have not been part of the training, 2 weeks training here at Elementaita, and they'd want to contact you or any of the panel members to just talk to them about the GCF processes and how to go about the systems way of the cribs to tap into the various networks to be able to engage in the GCF processes. Is it possible for someone to call you and ask you questions and interact with them on these GCF processes?
Of course, it's possible. I think wherever you post this video, there'll be a link there with our contact. And for us, I think, as we discussed with the fellow trainees, we really do want to support our countries access this financing. And if I can do it and my brother can do it, I will support my brother. I remember that interesting verse saying, I'm my brother's keeper. I think anybody who has ideas that they think can be funded by GCF and they don't know how to go about the process, we'll be more than happy to help them. And in case there is no contact on where this video is, just go to the ACT's website and send an email to info, and then we will get back to you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Beliu, coming to Kenya, this was your first time to come to Kenya. When you go back to Ethiopia and your president calls you and asks you, Bella, you were in Kenya for 2 weeks. What will you tell me? What can you tell me about the CRIBS processes and the GCF processes? And what are you bringing to your country from this workshop?
Okay, if I have got such chance, it will be a good opportunity for me because he's a president. Might get a lot audience through him, but in short, CRIBS is just a tool that bring innovativeness, because we know as business as usual, we're also working on that, but our effectiveness was not as such. So that's why CRIBS is now on board to help us to mobilize resources. So the main objective is just to linking network through technology, institutional setups, and so on, to bring sustainable climate change. In short, it's just a tool. My friends already mentioned some of the tool we have learned and what we are expected from us. So these are the tool. So it's good, I got a lot of experience from this. I can't be able to express because the output will be from my project can be seen.
Thank you very much. And what plans do you have? What plans do you think you'll put in place to ensure that you institutionalize CRIBS in your forestry ministry and also in your country, to ensure that more people learn about CRIBS processes for effective engagement to the various stakeholders for funding at the GCF? In case of my institution, as I told you before, I came from a government-funded organization, but through a time, the amount of fund is now declining, and the government could not able to fulfill for all projects what we proposed. So by now we have set a goal just to get fund from other agencies. It is a good opportunity for me, and every researchers are now looking for get this kind of funding agency. So through the system we have regular meeting under department, and the whole researchers under research institute, we have monthly meeting that we call it scientific forum
basically. So this meeting schedules is a good opportunity for me to speak out about GCF and CRIBS. I hope it is a need for every researchers, because we do like to mobilize resources, and it's also our duty. No one does this for us, So if I can able to try the tool and the methods properly, definitely they will be accept this, because we are on the way. It's a good opportunity for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, Dr. Emmanuel, when you go back to the University of Dar es Salaam, they will ask you what you have brought to them from this particular training in Nairobi. What will you take home, and what has been the most outstanding bits of the CRIBS training here in Elementaita, and how are you going to institutionalize the CRIBS mechanism at the University of Dar es Salaam and also Tanzania generally?
Oh, thank you very much. As I said earlier, basically we want to enhance and promote the use of improved energy sources from agricultural wastes, and address climate-related problems from the use of charcoal and firewood. Now, in this energy sector, there are many stakeholders who are involved, and they range from researchers, policymakers, but also those who are involved in making charcoal briquettes and like biogas. So there is a wide range of stakeholders who are involved in this energy sector. Now, at the university, we have our research teams, and I will have to start with my research team there, first of all, and develop the idea of how to apply the CRIBS idea in developing projects, in doing research, and as the CRIBS idea, which is all about thinking in a system-wise thinking, incorporating stakeholders, including beneficiaries of technologies. So from there, from the level of university, I will have to go now to involve other stakeholders from ministries, businesses, manufacturers of factories involved in production of this biotechnology related energies. Yeah.
So do you think your skills have been enhanced for you to go forth and take your proposal for funding to the GCF?
Definitely, I am saying yes, because I am going back different person from the one who came here. The thinking which I had on developing a research project is really improved now. So there is a possibility of writing fundable proposals which we can really put forward for funding.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. This has been an insightful discussion with the panelists from East Africa. It has been a wonderful 2 weeks here at Elementaita, just learning and engaging with top-level thinkers in their various government ministries and universities. And it has been quite an informative session. And I'm very glad to hear that whatever they have learned, they will implement. And within a few months, we will be happy to come back and say we have had a few of the proposals or all of them being considered by the GCF, because that was the main focus for the 2 weeks training here at Elementaita. Thank you very much, definitely, for having time to come to Nairobi. You've left your busy schedules to come and represent your countries, and we're very glad that you could make time to engage in these processes. Thank you very much, Mildred from the Ministry of Water and Environment, a senior economist, Dr. Kelvin Hissa, senior researcher and also the head of the Environment Department at Kirdi, Dr. George Moniki, who is the research director at NetFund, Beliu Limeni, who is a senior researcher with the Environment and Forestry Ministry in Addis Ababa, and Dr. Emmanuel Choir, who is a researcher and a consultant and a lecturer at the University of Dar es Salaam. Thank you very much.